Mali, officially the Republic of Mali, is a landlocked country in West Africa. It is the 8th largest country in Africa, with an area of over 1,240,192 square kilometers, 478,841 square miles. The country is bordered to the north by Algeria, to the east by Niger, to the northwest by Mauritania, to the south by Burkina Faso and Ivory Coast, and to the west by Guinea and Senegal. The population of Mali is about 23.29 million, 47.19% of which are estimated to be under the age of 15 in 2024. Its capital and largest city is Bamako. The country has 13 official languages, of which Bambara is the most commonly spoken. The sovereign state's northern borders reach deep into the middle of the Sahara Desert. The country's southern part, where the majority of inhabitants live, is in the Sudanian savanna and has the Niger and Senegal rivers running through it. The country's economy centers on agriculture and mining, with its most prominent natural resources including gold, of which it is the third largest producer in Africa, and salt. Mali was part of 3 successive powerful and wealthy West African empires that controlled trans-Saharan trade: the Ghana Empire, for which Ghana is named, the Mali Empire, for which Mali is named, and the Songhai Empire. At its peak in 1300, the Mali Empire was the wealthiest country in Africa, with its 14th-century emperor Mansa Musa believed to be one of the wealthiest individuals in history. Besides being a hub of trade and mining, medieval Mali was a center of Islam, culture, and knowledge, with Timbuktu becoming a renowned place of education with its university, one of the oldest in the world and still active. The expanding Songhai Empire absorbed the empire in 1468, followed by a Sa'adian army which defeated the Songhai in 1591. In the late 19th century, during the scramble for Africa, France seized control of Mali, making it a part of French Sudan. As the Sudanese Republic, a brief federation with Senegal was formed, achieving independence in 1960. After Senegal's withdrawal, the Republic of Mali was established. After a long period of one-party rule, a coup in 1991 led to a new constitution and the establishment of Mali as a democratic, multi-party state. In January 2012, an armed conflict broke out in northern Mali, in which Tuareg rebels took control of a territory in the north, and in April declared the secession of a new state, Azawad. The conflict was complicated by a military coup in March 2012 and later fighting between Tuareg and other rebel factions. In response to territorial gains, the French military launched Operation Serval in January 2013. A month later, Malian and French forces recaptured most of the north, although the conflict continued. Presidential elections were held on July 28, 2013, with a second-round runoff held on August 11, and legislative elections were held on November 24 and December 15, 2013. In the early 2020s, Mali experienced 2 military takeovers by Assimi Goïta. The name Mali is taken from the name of the Mali Empire. It means the place where the king lives and carries a connotation of strength. 14th-century Maghreb traveler Ibn Battuta reported that the capital of the empire was called Mali. One Mand Inca tradition tells that the legendary first emperor Sundiata Keita changed himself into a hippopotamus upon his death in the Sankarani River, and that it was possible to find villages in the area of this river called Old Mali. A study of Malian proverbs noted that in Old Mali, there is a village called Mali Koma, which means New Mali, and that Mali could have formerly been the name of a city. Another theory suggests that Mali is a Fulani pronunciation of the name of the Mande peoples. It is suggested that a sound shift led to the change, whereby in Fulani the alveolar segment /nd/ shifts to /l/ and the terminal vowel denasalizes and raises, leading Mandan to shift to /Mali. The Mali Federation gained independence from France on June 20, 1960. Senegal withdrew from the federation in August 1960, which allowed the Sudanese Republic to become the independent Republic of Mali on September 22, 1960, and that date is now the country's Independence Day. Modibo Keïta was elected the first president. He quickly established a one-party state, adopted an independent African and socialist orientation with close ties to the East, and implemented extensive nationalization of economic resources. In 1960, the population of Mali was reported to be about 4.1 million. On November 19, 1968, following progressive economic decline, the Keïta regime was overthrown in a bloodless military coup led by Mao Traoré, a day which is now commemorated as Liberation Day. Mao Traoré regime. The subsequent military-led regime, with Traoré as president, attempted to reform the economy. His efforts were frustrated by political turmoil and a devastating drought from 1968 to 1974, in which famine killed thousands of people. The Traoré regime faced student unrest beginning in the late 1970s and 3 coup attempts. The Traoré regime repressed all dissenters until the late 1980s. Opposition to the corrupt and dictatorial regime of General Mao Traoré grew during the 1980s. During this time strict programs, imposed to satisfy demands of the International Monetary Fund, brought increased hardship upon the country's population, while elites close to the government supposedly lived in growing wealth. The government continued to attempt economic reforms, and the populace became increasingly dissatisfied. In response to growing demands for multi-party democracy, the Traoré regime allowed some limited political liberalization in the late 1980s, but refused to usher in a full-fledged democratic system. In 1990, cohesive opposition movements began to emerge, and was complicated by the turbulent rise of ethnic violence in the north following the return of many Tuaregs who had migrated to Algeria and Libya during the drought. Peaceful student protests in January 1991 were brutally suppressed, with mass arrests and torture of leaders and participants. Scattered acts of rioting and vandalism of public buildings followed, but most actions by the dissidents remained nonviolent. From March 22 through March 26, 1991, mass pro-democracy rallies and a nationwide strike was held in both urban and rural communities, which became known as les événements, the events, or the March Revolution. In Bamako, in response to mass demonstrations organized by university students and later joined by trade unionists and others, soldiers opened fire indiscriminately on the nonviolent demonstrators. Riots broke out briefly following the shootings. Barricades as well as roadblocks were erected and Traoré declared a state of emergency and imposed a nightly curfew. Despite an estimated loss of 300 lives over the course of 4 days, nonviolent protesters continued to return to Bamako each day demanding the resignation of the dictatorial president and the implementation of democratic policies. March 26, 1991 is the day that marks the clash between military soldiers and peaceful demonstrating students which climaxed in the massacre of dozens under the orders of Traoré. He and 3 associates were later tried and convicted and received the death sentence for their part in the decision-making of that day. Nowadays, the day is a national holiday in order to remember the tragic events and the people who were killed. The coup is remembered as Mali's March Revolution of 1991. By March 26, the growing refusal of soldiers to fire into the largely nonviolent protesting crowds turned into a full-scale tumult, and resulted in thousands of soldiers putting down their arms and joining the pro-democracy movement. That afternoon, Lieutenant Colonel Amadou Toumani Touré announced on the radio that he had arrested the dictatorial president, Mao Traoré. Opposition parties were legalized, a transitional government was formed and a national congress of civil and political groups met to draft a new democratic constitution to be approved by a national referendum. In 1992, Alpha Oumar Konaré won Mali's first democratic, multi-party presidential election, before being re-elected for a second term in 1997, which was the last allowed under the constitution. Amadou Toumani Touré, a retired general who had been the leader of the military aspect of the 1991 democratic uprising, was elected in 2002. During this democratic period, Mali was regarded as one of the most politically and socially stable countries in Africa. Slavery persists in Mali today with as many as 200,000 people held in direct servitude to a master. In the Tuareg rebellion of 2012, ex-slaves were a vulnerable population with reports of some slaves being recaptured by their former masters. In January 2012 a Tuareg rebellion began in northern Mali, led by the National Movement for the Liberation of Azawad, MNLA. 58 In March, military officer Amadou Sanogo seized power in a coup d'état, citing Touré failures in quelling the rebellion, and leading to sanctions and an embargo by the Economic Community of West African States. The MNLA quickly took control of the north, declaring its independence as Azawad. However, Islamist groups, including Ansar Dine and Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, AQIM, who had helped the MNLA defeat the government, turned on the Tuareg and took control of the north with the goal of implementing Sharia in Mali. On January 11, 2013, the French armed forces intervened at the request of the interim government of President Dion Kounda Traoré. On January 30, the coordinated advance of the French and Malian troops claimed to have retaken the last remaining Islamist stronghold of Kidal, which was also the last of 3 northern provincial capitals. On February 2, French President François Hollande joined Dion Kounda Traoré in a public appearance in recently recaptured Timbuktu. In August 2013, Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta was elected as the new president of Mali in the second round of the election. Conflict in central Mali. In the central Mali province of Mopti, conflict has escalated since 2015 between agricultural communities like the Dogon and the Bambara, and the pastoral Fula, or Fulani, people. Historically, the two sides have fought over access to land and water, factors which have been exacerbated by climate change as the Fula move into new areas. The Dogon and the Bambara communities have formed self-defense groups to fight the Fula. They accuse the Fula of working with armed Islamists linked to Al-Qaeda. While some Fula have joined Islamist groups, Human Rights Watch reports that the links have been exaggerated and instrumentalized by different actors for opportunistic ends. Added a top Mali military commander. I've discussed the growing violence with my commanders and with village chiefs from all sides. Yes, sure, there are jihadists in this zone, but the real problem is banditry, animal theft, score settling. People are enriching themselves using the fight against terrorists as a cover. The conflict has seen the creation and growth of Dogon and Bambara militias. The government of Mali is suspected of supporting some of these groups under the guise of being proxies in the war against Islamists in the northern Mali conflict. The government denies this. One such militia is the Dogon group Dan N'Ambasago, created in 2016. In the 2018 Malian presidential election held on July 29, 2018, no candidate received more than 50% of the vote in the first round. A runoff was held on August 12, 2018 between the top two candidates, incumbent President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta of the Rally for Mali and Soumaïla Cissé of the Union for the Republic and Democracy, and Keïta was re-elected with 67% of the vote. In September 2018, the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue negotiated a unilateral ceasefire with Dan N'Ambasago in the context of the conflict which opposes the group to other community armed groups in central Mali. However, the group has been blamed for the March 24, 2019 massacre of 160 Fula villagers. The group denied the attack, but afterwards Malian President Keïta ordered the group to disband. The UN Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide, Adama Dieng, warned of a growing ethnicization of the conflict. By 2020, more than 600,000 people had been displaced by the conflict in Mali. The United Nations reported that the number of children killed in the conflict in the first 6 months of 2019 was twice as many for the entire year of 2018. Many of the children have been killed in intercommunal attacks attributed to ethnic militias, with the majority of attacks occurring around Mopti. It is reported that around 900 schools have closed down and that armed militias are recruiting children. During the first week of October 2019, 2 jihadist attacks in the towns of Boulikessi and Mondoro killed more than 25 Mali soldiers near the border with Burkina Faso. President Keita declared that no military coup will prevail in Mali, continuing by saying that he does not think it is on the agenda at all and cannot worry us. On November 1, 2019, the ISGS militants killed at least 50 soldiers in the 2019 Indelamain attack in the Menaka region of Mali. In February 2020, Human Rights Watch documented atrocities against civilians in central Mali and said that at least 456 civilians were killed, while hundreds were injured from January 2019 until November. Popular unrest began on June 5, 2020 following irregularities in the March and April parliamentary elections, including outrage against the kidnapping of opposition leader Soumaïla Cissé. Between 11 and 23 deaths followed protests that took place from 10 to June 13. In July, President Keita dissolved the Constitutional Court. Members of the military led by Colonel Assimi Goïta and Colonel Major Ismail Wag in Kati, Kaulakoro region, began a mutiny on August 18, 2020. President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita and Prime Minister Babou Cissé were arrested, and shortly after midnight Keita announced his resignation, saying he did not want to see any bloodshed. Wag announced the formation of the National Committee for the Salvation of the People, CNSP, and promised elections in the future. A curfew was begun and the streets of Bamako were quiet. The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, condemned the coup and demanded that Keita be reinstated as president. On September 12, 2020, the CNSP agreed to an 18-month political transition to civilian rule. Shortly after, Ba Enda was named interim president by a group of 17 electors, with Goïta being appointed vice president. The government was inaugurated on September 25, 2020. On January 18, 2021, the transitional government announced that the CNSP had been disbanded, almost 4 months after had been promised under the initial agreement. Tensions between the civilian transitional government and the military ran high after the handover of power in September 2020. The tensions came to a head on May 24, 2021 after a cabinet reshuffle, where two leaders of the 2020 military coup, Sadio Camara and Modibo Kone, were replaced by Enda's administration. Later that day, journalists reported that three key civilian leaders, President Enda, Prime Minister Mokhtar Wan and Defense Minister Souleymane Doucoure, were being detained in a military base in Kati, outside Bamako. On June 7, 2021, Mali's military commander Assimi Goïta was sworn into office as the new interim president. In 2022 and 2023, the Islamic State in the Greater Sahara saw major gains in the Mali War, occupying large swathes of territory in southeastern Mali. Ansongo and Tidermeni were also captured by the group. By mid-2023, the militant group had doubled the amount of territory it controlled since the overthrow of the previous government and establishment of the junta. On January 10, 2022, Mali announced the closure of its borders and recalled several ambassadors to ECOWAS countries in response to sanctions placed on Mali for deferring elections for 4 years. On February 4, France's ambassador was expelled. According to Human Rights Watch, Malian troops and suspected Russian mercenaries from the Wagner Group executed around 300 civilian men in central Mali in March 2022. France had started withdrawing French troops from Mali in February 2022, commencing the end of Operation Barkhane. On May 2, the military government announced breaking its defense accords concluded in 2013 with France, constituting an additional step in the deterioration of Malian-French relations. This latest announcement has been criticized by French authorities and considered as illegitimate. A UN panel reported that in the first 3 months of 2022, 543 civilians were killed and 269 wounded, warning the 2015 peace agreement between the government and pro-independence groups was threatened by a potential risk of confrontation for the first time in 5 years. The report also noted a sharp increase in the number of people needing humanitarian assistance over the previous year. In June 2023, Mali removed French as an official language with the approval of a new constitution by 97% of voters in a referendum conducted by the junta. On September 7, 2023, Al-Qaeda-linked JNIM militants attacked a vessel on the Niger River, killing at least 154 civilians. In July 2024, CSPDPA rebels and JNIM militants killed dozens of Russian mercenaries and Malian government forces during the Battle of Tinzawatan. On August 5, 2024, the Republic of Mali announced that it was severing diplomatic relations with Ukraine. On September 17, 2024, Al-Qaeda-linked JNIM militants attacked several locations across Bamako, killing at least 77 people and injuring 255 others. Mali is a landlocked country in West Africa, located southwest of Algeria. It lies between latitudes 10 degrees and 25 degrees north, and longitudes 13 degrees west and 5 degrees east. Mali borders Algeria to the north-northeast, Niger to the east, Burkina Faso to the southeast, Ivory Coast to the south, Guinea to the southwest, and Senegal to the west and Mauritania to the northwest. At 1,240,192 square kilometers, 478,841 square miles, Mali is the 24th largest country in the world and the 8th largest country in Africa. It is comparable in size to South Africa or Angola. Most of the country lies in the southern Sahara Desert, which produces an extremely hot, dust-laden Sudanian savanna zone. Mali is mostly flat, rising to rolling northern plains covered by sand. The Adrar de Ifagas Massif lies in the northeast. Mali lies in the torrid zone and is among the hottest countries in the world. The thermal equator, which matches the hottest spots year-round on the planet based on the mean daily annual temperature, crosses the country. Most of Mali receives negligible rainfall and droughts are very frequent. Late April to early October is the rainy season in the southernmost area. During this time, flooding of the Niger River is common, creating the inner Niger Delta. The vast northern desert part of Mali has a hot desert climate, Köppen climate classification BWH, with long, extremely hot summers and scarce rainfall which decreases northwards. The central area has a hot semi-arid climate, Köppen climate classification BSH, with very high temperatures year-round, a long, intense dry season and a brief, irregular rainy season. The southern areas have a tropical wet and dry climate, Köppen climate classification A. Mali has considerable natural resources, with gold, uranium, phosphates, kaolinite, salt, and limestone being most widely exploited. Mali is estimated to have in excess of 17,400 tons of uranium, measured plus indicated plus inferred. In 2012, a further uranium mineralized north zone was identified. Mali faces numerous environmental challenges, including desertification, deforestation, soil erosion, and inadequate supplies of potable water. 5 terrestrial ecoregions lie within Mali's borders: Sahelian acacia savanna, West Sudanian savanna, Inner Niger Delta flooded savanna, South Saharan steppe and woodlands, and West Saharan montane xeric woodlands. The country had a 2019 Forest Landscape Integrity Index mean score of 7.16/10, ranking it 51st globally out of 172 countries. Politics and government. Until the military coup of March 22, 2012, Mali was a constitutional democracy governed by the Constitution of January 12, 1992, which was amended in 1999. The Constitution provides for a separation of powers among the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of government. The system of government can be described as semi-presidential. Executive power is vested in a president, who is elected to a 5-year term by universal suffrage and is limited to 2 terms. The president serves as a chief of state and commander-in-chief of the armed forces. A prime minister appointed by the president serves as head of government and in turn appoints the council of ministers. The unicameral National Assembly is Mali's sole legislative body, consisting of deputies elected to 5-year terms. Following the 2007 elections, the Alliance for Democracy and Progress held 113 of 160 seats in the Assembly. The Assembly holds 2 regular sessions each year, during which it debates and votes on legislation that has been submitted by a member or by the government. Mali's constitution provides for an independent judiciary, but the executive continues to exercise influence over the judiciary by virtue of power to appoint judges and oversee both judicial functions and law enforcement. Mali's highest courts are the Supreme Court, which has both judicial and administrative powers, and a separate constitutional court that provides judicial review of legislative acts and serves as an election arbiter. Various lower courts exist, though village chiefs and elders resolve most local disputes in rural areas. The transition government pushed back the timetable for a new election, initially to be held in February 2022, to February 2024. In exchange for the government's commitment to a 2024 election, ECOWAS agreed to lift sanctions on the country. Until 2012, Mali's foreign policy orientation had become increasingly pragmatic and pro-Western over time. Since the institution of a democratic form of government in 2002, Mali's relations with the West in general and with the United States in particular have improved significantly. Mali has a long-standing yet ambivalent relationship with France, a former colonial ruler. Mali was active in regional organizations such as the African Union until its suspension over the 2012 Malian coup d'état. Working to control and resolve regional conflicts, such as in Ivory Coast, Liberia, and Sierra Leone, is one of Mali's major foreign policy goals. Mali feels threatened by the potential for the spillover of conflicts in neighboring states, and relations with those neighbors are often uneasy. General insecurity along borders in the north, including cross-border banditry and terrorism, remain troubling issues in regional relations. In early 2019, Al-Qaeda claimed responsibility for an attack on a United Nations base in Mali that killed 10 peacekeepers from Chad. 25 people were reported to have been injured in the attack. Mali's military forces consist of an army, which includes land forces and Air Force 6 as well as the paramilitary gendarmerie and Republican Guard, all of which are under the control of Mali's Ministry of Defense and Veterans, headed by a civilian. Since 2016, Mali has been divided into 10 regions and the district of Bamako. Each region has a governor. The implementation of the 2 newest regions, Dudnet, formerly part of Tombouctou region, and Menaka, formerly Menaka Circle in Gao region, has been ongoing since January 2016. A governor and transitional council has been appointed for both regions. Since 2023, Mali has added 9 new regions to its administrative structure, bringing the total to 19 regions plus the district of Bamako. This reorganization aims to improve governance and bring public services closer to local populations. This initiative continues the decentralization efforts that began with the creation of the Dudnet and Menaka regions in 2016. The 19 regions in turn are subdivided into 159 circles and 815 communes. The Central Bank of West African States handles the financial affairs of Mali and additional members of the Economic Community of West African States. Mali is considered one of the poorest countries in the world. The average worker's annual salary is approximately $1,500. Mali underwent economic reform, beginning in 1988 by signing agreements with the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. During 1988 to 1996, Mali's government largely reformed public enterprises. Since the agreement, 16 enterprises were privatized, 12 partially privatized, and 20 liquidated. In 2005, the Malian government conceded a railroad company to the Savage Corporation. 2 major companies, Société de Télécommunications du Mali, Sotelma, and the Cotton Ginning Company, CMDT, were expected to be privatized in 2008. Between 1992 and 1995, Mali implemented an economic adjustment program that resulted in economic growth and a reduction in financial imbalances. The program increased social and economic conditions and led to Mali joining the World Trade Organization on May 31, 1995. Mali is also a member of the Organization for the Harmonization of Business Law in Africa, AHETA. The gross domestic product, GDP, has risen since. In 2002, the GDP amounted to $3.4 billion and increased to $5.8 billion in 2005, which amounts to an approximately 17.6% annual growth rate. Mali is a part of the franc zone, zone franc, which means that it uses the CFA franc. Mali is connected with the French government by agreement since 1962, creation of BCEAO. Today all 7 countries of BCEAO, including Mali, are connected to French Central Bank. Before the August 2020 coup, U.S. foreign assistance to Mali exceeded $135 million in FY 2020, aiming to bolster fragile peace, democratic governance, and regional security, while addressing social and economic vulnerabilities. Post-coup, assistance is restricted under U.S. law, but ongoing programs focus on stability, public trust in government, community resilience and socio-economic prosperity. Mali was ranked 136th out of 139 in the Global Innovation Index in 2024. Mali's key industry is agriculture. Cotton is the country's largest crop export and is exported west throughout Senegal and Ivory Coast. During 2002, 620,000 tons of cotton were produced in Mali, but cotton prices declined significantly in 2003. In addition to cotton, Mali produces rice, millet, corn, vegetables, tobacco, and tree crops. Gold, livestock, and agriculture amount to 80% of Mali's exports. 80% of Malian workers are employed in agriculture. 15% of Malian workers are employed in the service sector. Seasonal variations lead to regular temporary unemployment of agricultural workers. In 1991, with the assistance of the International Development Association, Mali relaxed the enforcement of mining codes, which led to renewed foreign interest and investment in the mining industry. Gold is mined in the southern region, and Mali has the 3rd highest gold production in Africa, after South Africa and Ghana. In 2015, the country has produced 41 metric tons of gold. The emergence of gold as Mali's leading export product since 1999 has helped mitigate some of the negative impact of the cotton and Ivory Coast crises. Other natural resources include kaolin, salt, phosphate, and limestone. Electricity and water are maintained by the Énergie du Mali, or EDM, and textiles are generated by Industrie Textile du Mali, or ITMA. Mali has made efficient use of hydroelectricity, consisting of over half of Mali's electrical power. In 2002, 700 GWh of hydroelectric power were produced in Mali. Énergie du Mali is an electric company that provides electricity to Mali citizens. Only 55% of the population in cities have access to EDM. In Mali, there is a railway that connects to bordering countries. There are also approximately 29 airports, of which 8 have paved runways. Urban areas are known for their large quantity of green and white taxicabs. A significant sum of the population is dependent on public transportation. In 2021, Mali's population was an estimated 21.9 million. Mali's population grew from 7.7 million in 1982 to 19.9 million in 2018. The population is predominantly rural, 68% in 2002, and 5%, 10% of Malians are nomadic. More than 90% of the population lives in the southern part of the country, especially in Bamako, which has over 2 million residents. In 2024, about 47% of Malians were 14 years old or younger, 50% were 15 to 64 years old, and 3% were 65 and older. The median age was 16.4 years. The birth rate in 2024 was 40 births per 1,000, and the total fertility rate in 2024 was 5.35 children per woman. The death rate in 2024 was 8.1 deaths per 1,000. Life expectancy at birth was 63.2 years total, 60.9 for males and 65.6 for females. Mali has one of the world's highest rates of infant mortality, with 57.4 deaths per 1,000 live births in 2024. Mali's population encompasses a number of sub-Saharan ethnic groups. The Bambara are by far the largest single ethnic group, making up a third of the population. The largest ethnic groups are Bambara, 33.3%, Fulani, Pol, 13.3%, Serekol/Seninke/Marka, 9.8%, Sanyafo/Manianka, 9.6%, Malinke, 8.8%, Dogon, 8.7%, Sanre, 5.9%, Bobo, 2.1%, Tuareg/Bella, 1.7%, Other Malian, 6%, from members of Economic Community of West Africa, 0.4%, Other, 0.3%. 2018 EST. In Mali and in Niger, the Moors are also known as Azawak Arabs, named after the Azawak region of the Sahara. They speak mainly Hassaniya Arabic, one of the regional varieties of Arabic. In the far north, there is a division between Berber-descended Tuareg nomad populations and the darker-skinned Bella or Tamashek people, due to the historical spread of slavery in the region. An estimated 800,000 people in Mali are descended from slaves. Slavery has persisted in Mali for centuries. The Arabic population kept slaves well into the 20th century, until slavery was suppressed by French authorities around the mid-20th century. There still persists certain hereditary servitude relationships, and according to some estimates, even today approximately 200,000 Malians are still enslaved. Some mixed European/African descendants of Muslims of Spanish, as well as French, Irish, Italian, and Portuguese origin, live in Mali, where they are known as the Arma people, 1% of the nation's population. Although Mali has enjoyed reasonably good inter-ethnic relationships based on a long history of coexistence, some hereditary servitude and bondage relationship exist, as well as ethnic tension between settled Songhai and nomadic Tuaregs of the north. Due to a backlash against the northern population after independence, Mali is now in a situation where both groups complain about discrimination on the part of the other group. This conflict also plays a role in the continuing northern Mali conflict, where there is a tension between both Tuaregs and the Malian government, and the Tuaregs and radical Islamists who are trying to establish Sharia law. There is also a small Jewish community in Mali. In January 2022, due to deteriorating relations between Mali and the French government, the Mali government announced making Bambara the official language. In July 2023, French was dropped as an official language, becoming instead a working language. At the same time, the 13 national languages, namely Bambara, Bobo, Bozo, Dogon, Fula, Hassaniya Arabic, Kasonk, Maninke, Manianka, Sanyafo, the Songhai, Seninke, and Tamashek, became official languages. The lingua franca in Mali is mainly Bambara, which about 80% of the population can communicate in. Over 40 other African languages are spoken by the various ethnic groups of Mali. According to the 2009 census, the languages spoken natively in Mali were Bambara by 51.5%, Fula, 8.3%, Dogon, 6.6%, Seninke, 5.7%, Songhai, 5.3%, Mandinka, 5.2%, Manianka, 3.8%, Tamashek, 3.2%, Sanyafo, 2%, Bobo, 1.9%, Tiaxo Bozo, 1.6%, Kasonk, 1.1%, Moor or Hassaniya Arabic, 1%, Dafing, 0.4%, Samago, 0.4%, Arabic, other dialects, 0.3%, other Malayan languages, 0.5%, other African languages, 0.2%, and other non-African languages, 0.2%, 0.7% did not declare their first language. Islam was introduced to West Africa in the 11th century and remains the predominant religion in much of the region. An estimated 90% of Malians are Muslim, mostly non-denominational and Sunni, approximately 5% are Christian, about 2/3 Roman Catholic and 1/3 Protestant, and the remaining 5% adhere to traditional African religions such as the Dogon religion. Atheism and agnosticism are believed to be rare among Malians, most of whom practice their religion daily. The constitution establishes a secular state and provides for freedom of religion, and the government largely respects this right. Islam as historically practiced in Mali has been malleable and adapted to local conditions. Relations between Muslims and practitioners of minority religious faiths have generally been amicable. After the 2012 imposition of Sharia rule in northern parts of the country, however, Mali came to be listed high, number 7, in the Christian Persecution Index published by Open Doors, which described the persecution in the north as severe. Public education in Mali is in principle provided free of charge and is compulsory for 9 years between the ages of 7 and 16. The system encompasses 6 years of primary education beginning at age 7, followed by 6 years of secondary education. Mali's actual primary school enrollment rate is low, in large part because families are unable to cover the cost of uniforms, books, supplies, and other fees required to attend. In 2017, the primary school enrollment rate was 61%, 65% of males and 58% of females. In the late 1990s, the secondary school enrollment rate was 15%, 20% of males and 10% of females. The education system is plagued by a lack of schools in rural areas, as well as shortages of teachers and materials. Estimates of literacy rates in Mali range from 27 to 30 to 46.4%, with literacy rates significantly lower among women than men. The University of Bamako, which includes 4 constituent universities, is the largest university in the country and enrolls approximately 60,000 undergraduate and graduate students. Mali faces numerous health challenges related to poverty, malnutrition, and inadequate hygiene and sanitation. Mali's health and development indicators rank among the worst in the world. Life expectancy at birth is estimated to be 63.2 years in 2024. In 2000, 62 to 65% of the population was estimated to have access to safe drinking water and only 69% to sanitation services of some kind. In 2001, the general government expenditures on health totaled about $4 per capita at an average exchange rate. Efforts have been made to improve nutrition and reduce associated health problems by encouraging women to make nutritious versions of local recipes. For example, the International Crops Research Institute for the Semi-Arid Tropics, ICRISAT, and the AGACON Foundation, trained women's groups to make equinat, a healthy and nutritional version of the traditional recipe didig, comprising peanut paste, honey, and millet or rice flour. The aim was to boost nutrition and livelihoods by producing a product that women could make and sell, and which would be accepted by the local community because of its local heritage. Medical facilities in Mali are very limited, and medicines are in short supply. Malaria and other arthropod-borne diseases are prevalent in Mali, as are a number of infectious diseases such as cholera and tuberculosis. Mali's population also suffers from a high rate of child malnutrition and a low rate of immunization. An estimated 1.9% of the adult and children population was afflicted with HIV/AIDS that year, among the lowest rates in sub-Saharan Africa. An estimated 85%, 91% of Mali's girls and women have had female genital mutilation, 2006 and 2001 data. In 2024, approximately 7.1 million people in Mali, including over 3.8 million children, require urgent humanitarian assistance due to escalating conflict and climate crises. UNICEF is amplifying its efforts to provide essential services like health, education, and protection, while appealing for $133.5 million to address these needs. The situation is dire, with over 522,000 children lacking access to education and millions at risk of malnutrition amid underfunded humanitarian responses. Urgent action is needed to mitigate the impacts of violence, insecurity, and climate change on vulnerable populations in Mali. In 2017, Mali ranked 157th out of 160 countries in the Gender Inequality Index as reported by the United Nations Development Programme. The Malian constitution states that it protects women's rights, however many laws exist that discriminate against women. Provisions in the laws limit women's decision-making power after marriage, in which the husband becomes superior to his wife. Women are blamed for not maintaining the appearance of their husbands and are also blamed for the actions of their children if they misbehave, which encourages the cultural attitude that women are inferior to men. The lack of participation of women in politics is due to the idea that politics is associated with men and that women should avoid this sector. Education is also an area in which boys dominate, since it is a better investment for the parents. As traditional values and practices have contributed to gender inequality in Mali, conflict and lawlessness have also influenced the growing gap in gender through gender-based violence. The unstable government of Mali has led to organizations like USAID attempting to improve the lives of the people, mainly women and girls' rights in order to re-engage the development of the country. Religion, the patriarchal norms, and gender-based violence are major negative factors shaping the life of women in Mali. Patriarchal norms cause major gender inequalities and lead to male domination within the household. Girls learn household activities like chores, cooking, childcare, etc. at a young age and are expected to take the main responsibility of household chores throughout their life. This hampers women's ability to enter the formal workforce and leads to a lack of education of girls. Gender-based violence in Mali happens both on a national and a family level. At the national level, in 2012 the conflict in the northern part of the country increased cases of kidnappings and rapes. The conflict also reduced women's access to resources, economy, and opportunities. At the household level, Malian women face gender-based violence through domestic violence, forced marriages, and marital rape. The Demographic Health Survey for Mali in 2013 stated that 76% of women and 54% of men believed physical harm towards women was acceptable if the women burnt food, argued back, went out without notifying her husband, or refused sexual relations with her husband. In 2024, Mali officials approved a bill criminalizing homosexual relations between same-sex couples. After adjusting the entrance requirements and access to education, girls still have lower enrollment rates and less access to formal education. Dropout rates for girls are 15% higher than that of boys because they have a higher responsibility at home and most parents refuse to allow all their children to go to school, so boys tend to become educated. Similarly, technical and vocational education has a lower numbers of girls participating and are inadequately distributed in the country because the training centers are focused in the urban cities. Finally, higher education for girls consists of short programs because early marriages prevent most girls from pursuing a longer-term education program like those in science. Although women do not have the same access of education, in recent decades women have been entering and representing in decision-making positions in the public administration sector. Out of 147 members of parliament, 15 were women in 2010. Recent decades show that women are slowly joining important decision-making positions, which is changing the attitude and status of women in Mali, which has led to the promotion of women's rights in the political sphere. Legislation at the international and national levels have been implemented over the decades to help promote women's rights in Mali. At the international, Mali signed the Beijing Platform for Action, which suggests that women should participate in decision-making, and the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which is the foundation to women's rights promotion. At the national level, Mali's constitution has the Decree No. 092-073 PCTSP that claims equality to all Malian citizens and discrimination is prohibited, which has not been followed. The Poverty Reduction Strategy Program, PRSP, and the Growth and Poverty Reduction Strategy Program under the Malian government seek to improve the well-being of the citizens, and changes to governance and gender in the country. The Ministry for Advancement of Women, Children, and the Family was created specifically for women and children so that their basic rights and needs get met under the law. Although there exists legislation and policy for gender equality, the institutionalization of the national gender policy of Mali is necessary to support the importance of women's rights. Strengthening and the support of girls' and women's access to education and training is recommended to improve gender equality in Mali. The involvement of international organizations like USAID assist Mali financially to enhance their development through the efforts of the improvement of women's rights. The varied everyday culture of Malians reflects the country's ethnic and geographic diversity. Most Malians wear flowing, colorful robes called babous that are typical of West Africa. Malians frequently participate in traditional festivals, dances, and ceremonies. Malian musical traditions are derived from the griots, who are known as keepers of memories. Malian music is diverse and has several different genres. Some famous Malian influences in music are Kora virtuoso musician Toumani Diabate, the Ngoni with Basakau Kouiate the virtuoso of the electric Jali Ngoni, the late roots and blues guitarist Ali Farka Touré, the Tuareg band Teneruan, Kara Arbi, and several Afropop artists such as Salif Keita, the duo Amadou Et Mariam, Umusangar, Fatoumata Diawara, Rokia Traore, and Habib Koit. Dance also plays a large role in Malian culture. Dance parties are common events among friends, and traditional mask dances are performed at ceremonial events. Though Mali's literature is less famous than its music, Mali has always been one of Africa's liveliest intellectual centers. Mali's literary tradition is passed mainly by word of mouth, with Jalis reciting or singing histories and stories known by heart. Amadou Hampat Ba, Mali's best-known historian, spent much of his life writing these oral traditions down for the world to remember. The best-known novel by a Malian writer is Yambo Olagui M's Le Devoir de Violence, which won the 1968 Prix Renaudot but whose legacy was marred by accusations of plagiarism. Other well-known Malian writers include Baba Traore, Madabo Sonkalo Keita, Massa Makan Diabate, Moussa Konate, and Fili Dabo Sissoko. The most popular sport in Mali is association football, which became more prominent after Mali hosted the 2002 African Cup of Nations. Most towns and cities have regular games. The most popular teams nationally are Jaliba AC, Stade Malien, and Real Bamako, all based in the capital. Informal games are often played by youths using a bundle of rags as a ball. Basketball is another major sport. The Mali women's national basketball team, led by Hamshatou Mega, competed at the 2008 Beijing Olympics. Traditional wrestling, la lutte, is also somewhat common, though popularity has declined in recent years. The game wari, a Mankala variant, is a common pastime. Mali featured a men's national team in beach volleyball that competed at the 2018 to 2020 CAVB Beach Volleyball Continental Cup. Rice and millet are the staples of Malian cuisine, which is heavily based on cereal grains. Grains are generally prepared with sauces made from edible leaves, such as spinach or baobab, with tomato peanut sauce, and may be accompanied by pieces of grilled meat, typically chicken, mutton, beef, or goat. Malian cuisine varies regionally. Other popular dishes include fufu, jollof rice, and maf. In Mali, there are several newspapers such as Les Echos, LSIR, Info Matin, Nouvelle Horizon, and Le Républicain. Office de Radiodiffusion Télévision du Mali is the state-owned service. Telecommunications in Mali include 869,600 mobile phones, 45,000 televisions and 414,985 internet users. Thank you for watching this video.